We'll now go over study problem 4-3, page 132 from our textbook. Let's first figure out what are the givens in the problem. So we are provided with sales figure, cost of goods sold, and operating expenses. Besides, we are also given some extra information such as retained earnings and how many shares outstanding for the firm and dividends per share. Okay, so given all these, the problem is first asking from us to construct an income statement. We start with our income statement for part A of our problem. Well, on top of our income statement, as you all remember, we have our sales figure. In our case, sales is $400,000. Next, we would have cost of goods sold, and we're lucky, it's given, so in the amount of $112,000. Well, the difference between sales and cost of goods sold will give us our gross profit, and in our case it would be $288,000. See that I'm trying to align my numbers on the right side, so I have a pretty decent looking income statement at the end. Next, we should have our operating expenses. It's also provided in our problem. Expenses in the amount of $130,000. Doing the difference one more time, we should get our operating income in the amount of 158, I believe, yes, $158,000. So we're pretty much done with the first part of the problem. Now though, we hit a barrier here because we do not know how to calculate our interest expense. And so let me just write down what we're missing currently so in the statement. So far what I'm missing is our interest expense, and once I have that number here, I can subtract from operating income to get earnings before taxes, and obviously I don't know that number either. And then I would further deduct my taxes, and I will come upon my final line, which is net income here. But as I said, we are pretty much, we have a barrier here right now that we need to somehow figure out what to do next. So we already have used the first givens in our problem. I've made use of sales, I've made use of cost of goods sold and operating expenses. So I need to really think carefully. One thing that I was given is total number of stocks outstanding and dividends per share for all these stocks. In fact, I should be able to make use of these numbers, right? So I have 22,000 stocks outstanding, and each one will receive $1.80 dividend. So from there, I should be able to easily come up with my total dividend payments. So let me open a new page and let me do some additional calculation in that new page. So total dividends paid, let's figure that out. Dividends paid is equal to dividend per share, and apparently that number is $1.60, and we have 22,000 shares outstanding. So the product will give me my dividends paid. But why do I do that product? Well, because once I have dividends paid and I know my retained earnings, it's given in the problem. Retained earnings is let me go previous slide. I believe retained earnings was $58,000. So those two figures, so this one is $58,000. So those two figures added will give me my net income, right? Because once a company has net income available for its shareholders, what do? Some of it we pay out as dividends to our shareholders, and the rest we retain to grow our company, because our company needs to stay competitive against other firms. So let's move on and let's actually find out what our dividends paid. So 1.6 times 22,000, that should I think that should give us like what, 35,200, I believe. Make sure you redo these calculations on your own when you have time. But yeah, I have a pretty good feeling that's what I should get. And then adding these two numbers, I should get 0, 0, 0, 2, 3, and 9. Yes. So therefore, this is my net income, 93,200. Let's go to the previous slide and input that number in. Down. And that figure here is 93,200. So that's really awesome. So we're done with our net income. Now let's work our way upwards. So we one by one we will complete every single stage. So now we need taxes. So do I have any information given regarding what our tax rate is? Yes, of course. Of course, we know we are in the 34% tax bracket. So what that means is that because our net income is 93,200, let me open a new page and let me briefly make some quick calculations. So obviously net income is equal to earnings before taxes minus total taxes, right? And let's rewrite EBT minus, how about the tax liability? A tax liability is a portion of our earnings before taxes. In fact, it's the tax rate, which is in our case 34% times the earnings before taxes. So, and by the way, I already calculated net income to be 93,200. Just moving things around, we just realized that we can group the right hand side. It would give us EBT times 1 minus 0.34 equals to that 93,200 things. So therefore, earnings before taxes would be simply equal to 93,200 divided by 1 minus 0.34 is simply 0.66, and that will give us our income before taxes, or earnings before taxes, in the amount of 141,212, making some rounding. That's our earnings before taxes, and let's go ahead and go to the previous slide and input that in. So that number here is 141,212. But then it's pretty straightforward to figure out what taxes is. You can either multiply our earnings before taxes by 0.34, or even better, you can look at the difference between earnings before taxes and net income. Because we reach net income by subtracting taxes from earnings before taxes, really the difference between these two numbers is the tax value. And in that case, that would be 48,000. Is it $12? Yeah. Obviously, 2 minus 2 would give you 0. 1 minus 1 is 0, 0. 2 minus 0 is a 2. 3. Yeah, we are pretty much, that's correct. The only piece missing here is interest expense, but guess what? Again, the same thing. The difference between operating income and earnings before taxes is the interest expense. So I can just simply look at the difference between these two numbers, and lo and behold, that's what we get. So we are done with the first part of our problem. We were able to produce our income statement. Let's move up. The second part of the question is asking for operating profit margin. That one should take us just a few minutes, because obviously operating profit margin is operating profit, or you can say operating income, divided by total sales. So that's a no-brainer. So in that case, you should get, I believe, 39.5%. So 1 for 58 divided by 400 will give you the correct choice. And finally, for times interest earned, all you need is operating income again, which is 158, remember, divided by interest expense in the amount of $16,788. That one should give you a 9.4 times, because it's times interest earned. This financial ratio is, the units of this ratio is times, so the answer would be 9.4 times. Let me write that down here. So the answer to the part C would give you 9.4 times. And for operating profit margin, recall that we simply divided operating income by sales, and we got 39.5%. and that will complete our solution. So we are pretty much done.